everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the fourth webinar in our series of alternative funding. This is being recorded, so you can catch it again. It's going to be so fun and interesting. You can grab it at any time you'd like for your leisure. We are going to be going through all of the wonderful things about this alternative funding, and we'll turn it over to Lewis for right now.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you again for your patience. We're excited to share the fourth in our series of alternative funding ideas. For those of you that aren't familiar with Weiner Benefits Group, we want to introduce you to our firm. On the screen, you see my partner, Mike Reckner, and I. The mission of the firm and our team here is built on long-lasting relationships, evaluating your needs and your concerns with expertise and integrity. Our desire is to provide you a peace of mind, a sense of security for both you and your employees. And we hold ourselves accountable to you to provide personalized, accessible service, proactive and innovative solutions. We're knowledgeable, competent, thorough, and forward-thinking. We've been around a long time. We've been around since 1938. We're in our third round of leadership here at Weiner since then. And we're excited to bring this technology and service to you today. As a firm, we are providing innovative solutions from hire to retire. So if you think about everything from the time you hire somebody all the way to and through retirement, every aspect of that, we have a service and a resource for you, from employee benefits, life, disability, alternative healthcare funding, which is our conversation today, HR systems, so everything you need to deliver and communicate and engage your employees. And then as far as retirement plans go, we use a holistic, centralized approach, a financial well-being assessment, and we bring education, engagement, plan design, compliance support, administrative support, and individual planning. And we do that through a wonderful team of professionals, licensed professionals, that will be your guides through that process from hire to retire. You see our partners here, and on the call, you see Wendy Weingartner, one of our account executives. Also on the call is James Barker and Allison. But we have a full group of professionals that will help you and lead you and guide you. So we would be excited to entertain any kind of call or questions, or to assist you in anything that you would need. And as far as this webinar series goes, this is the fourth, as I mentioned. All of these webinars are recorded and they will be on our website. So you just have to go to our website and you'll see a panel where you can click and get all of these. This is recorded today and it'll show up on the website probably in the next couple of days. But we started out with ICRAs, individual company health reimbursement arrangements. We then moved into partial self-funding, traditional style, and level funding. And then we talked about captives. And today we're going to talk about consortium. So I'm not going to steal thunder from our speaker today, but people are looking for alternatives because the costs are just getting so high to manage a health and welfare program. So a consortium is a group of employers that come together to pool resources and reduce costs through group purchasing power. And these efforts bring reduced costs, provide better control and terms of all the components, and an enhanced risk and claims management process that can bend the curve over time in a very controllable way. And we're excited about this option because it does fit in and give you, in essence, the best of all the world, from fully insured to self-insured. And then Wendy, do you want to introduce our speaker today?
I am so happy to. We are honored to have Dave Winchell join us. Dave works at Benecon. He's been working in the wonderful insurance industry since 1990. He joined Benecon in 1996, and he's now the Senior Director of Sales for Benecon, and he handles Veris self-funding. We're honored to be working with Dave, and he is here to educate us on the self-funding projects, the consortium. Dave?
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. Good morning to everybody. I have the first couple slides. It's just a snapshot of the components of self-funding. If you go to the next slide, you'll see there's two contracts, excuse me, that we purchase to protect groups from claims we don't want them exposed to. So the first one is called a specific stop loss contract. So what that does is basically we're gonna set a specific deductible amount, which would be the employer's responsibility based on your size. And then anything above that threshold is covered by the specific stop loss contract. And it's an unlimited lifetime benefit as far as any claims that a member would incur that fall above that specific deductible. In the standalone market for self-funding, and I'll address it a little bit more in a second on another slide, but basically there is a terminology in standalone self-funding called lasering on a claim. And what that means is at renewal, if the stop loss reinsurer identifies an ongoing high claimant, they have that opportunity to say, I will renew your contract, but I'm not going to cover that person, and they're going to have a higher spec level for their ongoing condition. I'll get ahead of myself. We eliminate all of that under the consortium model, but we just wanted to educate you that does exist. And then the next contract, which is on the next slide, is basically an aggregate contract. You want to go to the next slide, Wendy? Are you controlling it? Yeah, there you go. And then typically what this does is, in other words, it provides and builds a box around the liability that the employer is taking on under a self-funded plan. And so if your claims hit that maximum liability, and how that's determined is you look at what do we expect the claims to be as far as an overall claim volume for claims under that specific deductible. And then we add a corridor to that to develop the maximum liability. Now, depending on the state where a group resides will determine what that minimum threshold is. So for an example, all the states around us, except for Maryland, we can go down to a 10% corridor. Typically, the range is anywhere from 110% of the expected to 125% of the expected is where they develop that maximum liability. So basically what we're saying is if the claims go over that max liability, then the aggregate insurance will kick in and pay 100% of the claims for the balance of that contract period. And then if you go to the next slide, it kind of breaks it down. So you have the terminology within self-funding called the fixed cost. So that's basically the insurance premiums for those two contracts that you're paying to have that coverage along with any administrative fees. Typically, we're going to align with a third-party administrator or a carrier. So under a carrier, they basically refer to it as an administrative service only or an ASO contract. And then TPAs, typically, it's going to be a third-party administrator that provides the network, adjudicates the claims. Your variable is always going to be your claim fund. So that's going to basically, depending on what your claims are under that specific deductible, will determine really, in essence, what was paid in claims. And then your total cost becomes really the fixed cost plus your claims that you paid for claims under that spec deductible.
And Dave, I just wanted to remind everybody that Wendy is monitoring for questions. So chime in with the Q&A. And when there's a question that pops up, Dave, we'll let you know, and we can just pause and ask. And I'll be the first one in respect to that. When you talk about networks and TPAs, and a lot of the people on the call here are from the Delaware, Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey area. What are some of the networks and TPAs that they might be familiar with that would be available in a program like this?
Well, in Delaware, all of the Veris groups are utilizing a Highmark as the administrator under what's called a administrative service only contract. So basically, they're providing the network access to the network, and then they're adjudicating the claims. So you're getting really the full discounts there, and depending on where a group is located, we have a fair amount of groups with Meritain, which is Aetna's third-party administrator. We have a fair amount of groups with UMR, which would be United Healthcare. That's their third-party administrator. In Pennsylvania, we have, especially Central PA, it's either going to be Highmark or Capital, typically, as the administrator. So again, we actually have 40 different 40 plus now administrators vetted, because we're throughout the whole country. So we'll always try to recommend the best fit depending on where a group is located.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We can go to the next slide. So the traditional consortium model, basically, as Louis elaborated, it's what we're doing is we're aggregating multiple groups or multiple employers and creating a group purchasing environment. Now, traditionally, most of the models in the past, and probably even still today to some extent, are what we call 100% risk share, meaning that everybody pays the same rate and has different plans they can select from. And in essence, what you have there is you have basically good performers helping to subsidize poorer performers. Typically, under these kind of models, the carrier or administrator generally does not provide claim utilization data, because they don't want the good ones leaving, and so that's why they don't really share a lot of that information. Historically, we have taken a completely different approach, where which is what we're going to kind of go over right now, which we basically look at a limited risk share model. So most of the money is controlled by the members, and we'll get into that in the next subsequent slides. Is there any questions? Okay, we can go to
There's no questions yet, Dave.
Okay, all right. You can go to the next slide. So, as I alluded in my bio, I started with the original owner in 1990. We started our first collective purchasing arrangement in 1991 with 6 municipalities in Central PA. Fast forward, we actually managed 14 different programs, both in the public sector and private sector. Our largest consortium is the Veris Consortium, which would be the program if you were to entertain joining a consortium. That would be the one more than likely that you would wind up joining. The other ones, all the other ones are specific to different organizations, and so typically Veris is going to be the one that we would align you with. You can go to the next slide. So our role in this whole process is we manage those 14 different programs, and we basically provide get some feedback somewhere. We provide basically all of the back room. So we provide the actuarial, we provide the finance team that does all the money management. We provide a compliance team that provides all the compliance support through our broker partners. And we also have a sister company, Connect Care 3, which basically provides healthcare navigation, wellness, health coaching. We have on-staff dietitians. So again, we're really looking at this thing on the total picture for all these groups that are in a self-funded platform. Next slide kind of shows you really our footprint from a nationwide standpoint. The dark blue states are where we have members that are in one of our 14 different programs. The majority of them are under the Veris model. Then we also, you'll see from a volume standpoint, you'll see from I think on the stats here, I mean, we're managing close to $3 billion in premium equivalent. So we have a fair amount of volume from that standpoint. So we set all of our trends and everything relative to our total book of business that we manage. I think the most important stat is we maintain over 32 years of 98% retention of groups that come into one of our consortium models. We're kind of getting close to north of, I think now, 2,000 employer groups overall. And the key to this whole thing, you'll see in a minute, is really managing a global stop loss premium. So that's how we protect all the members that are part of any of these programs. We go to the next slide. So just to kind of put it in perspective, so we're the administrator for these group purchasing arrangements. We have selected key broker partners that understand the model and see the value of the model for their clients. So we're not really contracting every single consultant out there. We're sort of selective from that standpoint on a geographical basis. And they're providing really all of the everyday resources to their members. As I alluded earlier, we have 40 plus TPA, ASO providers that in essence you could actually select. Now, the beauty of that is we're handling all the risk through the Veris or through the consortium model. And you can plug and play an administrator. You can make a change to an administrator. So you have sort of complete flexibility from that standpoint. Excuse me, we have 3 stop loss partners that we work with that agree to all of the concessions, which I'll get into in a second. And they're all A+ rated carriers.
And Dave, I would add that in addition, the beauty of these various networks allow often that whatever network an employer group is used to, they may be able to find that same network of providers. So transitioning to a program like this could be as close to seamless as you could get in a sense, if they're transferring, for instance, from a Blue Cross program to a Blue Cross ASO or an Aetna network to the Meritain Aetna network and so on. So that has worked very well for our clients that have gone down this path in the past.
Agreed. Now each state's going to have, or excuse me, each carrier is going to have minimum sizes that they'll go down to. So that sometimes can come into play as well. So I'll spend most of the time really on this slide, and the reason being is I can't really fit our risk model into any of the existing funding arrangements. We kind of, I would say, take the good from each one of them and eliminate some of the negative aspects. So when a group comes in, I'm going to screen a group coming in from an underwriting standpoint. Let's assume that there's nothing ongoing within the group and they join Veris. Once you have joined, I will never re-underwrite a group ever again. So that is really kind of protecting you from a guaranteed renewable standpoint. Also, we will, since we're not underwriting or re-underwriting a group at renewal, there would never be any new lasers at renewal. Now, I can use a higher spec deductible on a group coming in if they have an ongoing condition. Obviously, if it made financial sense, which a lot of times it still does, I can use a higher spec level on a member within the group if they have an ongoing condition. Again, we have to try to protect the existing premium volume and pool that basically is protecting all the existing members. The other thing is I'll never use an individual member's loss experience for claims above the specific deductible. Honestly, I'm not aware of any other program that's going to do that for a group. So we are basically managing that global stop loss over time to a target loss ratio of 78%, meaning that I want to be able to pay out 78 cents on every dollar that is paid in. So we really are controlling those margins from the carrier side as far as providing that coverage to cover those claims we don't want a group exposed to. So what you get from fully insured is it's guaranteed renewable and you're protected from the volatility of high claimants. The problem with fully insured is twofold. One is that when they develop a renewal, carriers have what they call a manual rate, meaning that their actuaries in the back room are figuring out how much money went out the door and how much money do we need coming in the door on a global basis for that carrier. So that's where they come up with this manual rate. And then depending on your size, they're going to use some of your experience, but in most cases, groups are not 100% credible until they're north of 600 or 1,000 covered employees. So in essence, you're always being the manual rate is always being calculated into your renewal under a fully insured contract. The beauty of our model is I'm going to use 100% of your individual experience for claims under that specific deductible. And so therefore, you're really getting a lot more of your own individual experience applied to your total funding. The advantage of self-funding is obvious. It's basically you have full transparency. You can plug and play who you want to use as an administrator. You have full transparency as far as claims, and also how your renewal premium adjustments are calculated. And you control 100% of any surplus at the end of the year. So in essence, you're getting all the positive benefits, and we're eliminating the negative aspects. And the negative aspects are simply that at renewal, I'm not going to re-underwrite you. I am not going to impose any kind of lasers, and I'm not going to use your individual loss experience for claims above that specific deductible at renewal. Whereas under a standalone, those are the pitfalls for standalone self-funding. And it's becoming more concerning probably now and moving into the future, just with what we're seeing in specialty meds and the technology from a healthcare standpoint. I mean, for an example, we've had, I think, since the last 5 years, I think we've had 6 heart transplants. And heart transplants can run anywhere from $2.5 million to $3 million. Obviously, if that's your last shot, you're probably going to say, have at it from that standpoint. I think the only thing that's similar to from a level carrier standpoint is that we have two different ways the groups can fund. Most of the groups, especially that are under 100 enrolled, we typically will set them up on what we call pay at max. So we will basically establish a bank account in their name, and then we'll bill the groups their admin, their stop loss premium, and their maximum claim fund liability, similar to what a level funded carrier would do. The differences are that we set all of the rates through our independent actuarial team. So it's not the carrier developing the rates. Most carrier level funded plans, the carrier keeps a portion of the surplus. Under Verus, the model, then you're basically controlling 100% of any of those funds that were deposited into your bank account. And the bank account's in your name, and it's actually earning interest from that standpoint. I think the closest would be maybe a captive model. Since we set the rates and we manage that insurance piece of it to a target loss ratio, I think we're actually accomplishing what a captive is attempting to accomplish, but we eliminate some of the negative aspects. And those would be most captives. If you become part of a captive, then you as an employer are responsible for that captive layer. So a lot of times you have to put up collateral, because if that captive layer runs out of money, then they're going to assess every member that's part of that captive to replenish those shortfalls. The other issue is that they're buying insurance from the open market. So in essence, anything that goes above that captive layer, they're basically paying market price for that insurance that they're purchasing. Whereas we're, again, managing the whole volume that we run to this target loss ratio. So in essence, in theory, we're really discounting that catastrophic layer when we're developing the overall premium to cover those risks that we don't want members exposed to. And I would say our admin fees we charge a per employee per month admin fee based on a group size. That's how we get paid to run the program. So there aren't any hidden costs that are associated with the model that we run. And I think the last note on this slide is simply that We also provide caps. So we developed the global adjustment to the stop loss, and you'll see the historical performance of the Verus model in a second. And we set that first when we're doing the renewal adjustments. And by the way, under the Verus program, there's 2 renewal cycles depending on when a group comes in. You can come in anytime during the year, and it's either going to be a July to June, or January to December. So if a group comes in anywhere from October through March, they get aligned with a January to December cycle. And if they come in any of the other months, then we align them with the July to June. But we'll actually cap the adjustment to the global stop loss is one cap that we provide. And then the additional cap is we'll provide a cap on the renewal adjustment to your claim fund, which is covering the claims under that specific deductible. And the reason we do that is a group could have an off year and they had more maybe high claimants or shock claims in a given year than what was expected from an actuarial projection standpoint. So we will provide a cap again to their adjustment because they could come back down to where they were the next year. So there's no reason to overfund into their claim fund from that standpoint. You can go to the next slide, probably.
Dave, what size group fits this consortium? What's the best fit?
I would say our target typically is at 50 plus. In central PA, capital will go down to 20 covered employees, but I think the target is probably groups that fall anywhere from that 50 to 1,000. Our smallest group is a 20. Since we have that ability to do that for groups in central PA. Highmark is basically 51 eligible in Delaware. Maryland is 51 enrolled, and that's due to their small group reform in that 2 to 50 market. Our average size group is 110. Our largest group is 5,200.
Well, and to add perspective to that, thank you for David. A real world example from our perspective was a client that was in a traditional self-funded mechanism. So they were seeing cash flow up and down with claims, paying claims as they go from month to month. They had a couple bad years where they had a large claimant that got lasered, so their exposure was higher the following year because of the lasering. And then they moved once things settled down a bit, they moved into the Verus Consortium, and they were able to cap their renewal. They were able to eliminate lasers. They were able to stabilize cash flow because they were in that trust that you mentioned. And they subsequently, the following year, had probably the worst claims year they ever had. But it was perfect timing on their part because they were saved by the levelized cash flow that you mentioned. They were saved by no lasering, and they were saved by a cap on the following year's renewal. Now, a couple years beyond that, they have probably, I think, over $100,000 in surplus because the unused claims stay in the plan, and then they can pull those out and use them in the following year. So it's worked exactly how it was supposed to work for this as a real world example for this particular client. So it gives you the best aspects of partial self-funding, which they had been for decades, but then they also managed the risk in a way that was really, really advantageous for their cash flow and their overall costs.
And Louis, to your point, I would say the last couple of years we've had more groups join Verus that were self-funded, and the reason being is it's the protection. In other words, that I think we're north of 600 million in just Verus alone, as far as the stop loss volume. So that volume is really what's protecting all of the members, and we've had several situations where in essence. They've had hired somebody and they're taking a specialty medication. Those are getting rather expensive in a lot of cases. and they're protected by that overall volume. So that's really, and that's why we kind of use this limited risk share model, because I mean 60 to 70% of the funding is going into their claim fund, which is their money. The other portion is admin is typically generally under 10%. Under the fully insured ACA requirements, a fully insured carrier can charge 15% admin for groups above 100 and 20% admin for groups that are under 100. So we're saving, you get immediate savings from an administrative standpoint. You also aren't paying state premium tax. And depending on the state, like Pennsylvania is 2.5%. So 2.5% of your fully insured premium is tax. So we eliminate, you're only paying premium tax on the stop loss insurance that you're purchasing, and you're eliminating that additional cost when you go into a self-funded platform, which is one of the bullets on this slide. So again, I think the key thing here is simply we bring a risk model that has been performing for 32 plus years. And it's the same model that we use for all of the 14 different programs that we run. I've been doing this since 1991. So we basically, that's what we do, is aggregate multiple employers together, and they form these purchasing groups, and it's providing them that protection. So I've always said, under the Veris model, you get all the positive benefits of being self-funded, and you get all the protection that you typically have under a fully insured combined together. As I alluded, we set all the rates. So basically, our actuarial team does all the rate development. And so when we're bringing groups in, we're setting the rates for what they would need to pay coming in. Just while we're on that subject, if a group does not have claim data, so if they are under 100 in most cases, they don't have any claim history, we will actually, what we do is we shadow price their fully insured renewal. We have to go on a premise that the carrier is not setting the renewal to lose money. We've had situations where a fully insured carrier will come back and adjust the renewal. Well, then we'll use the adjusted renewal to determine the claim budget. Usually that's good, because that gives you a much clearer idea as far as what the underlying costs are from a claim utilization standpoint. If groups have claim data, then we're going to look at the last 2 years and year-to-date claim data to develop that claim budget. And then we do all the renewals. So we generate the global renewal on the stop loss. That's really what's going to kind of be used to adjust each member's stop loss adjustment. And then we establish what adjustments we need to make to the claim fund based on their historical experience. Again, you have a lot more control. So under a self-funded platform, you don't have to adhere to state mandated benefits. Everything is driven by ERISA. So that's really, that's what we have to abide by from a benefit design standpoint. As I alluded earlier, we have full transparency. We have a lot more detailed claim data, so we can get more involved from that standpoint. And lastly, everybody controls 100% of any surplus that's left over at the end of a plan year. And typically, if the group is pay at max, or we're setting up a trust account, then typically we'll close out that prior year 3 months after the plan year. And that at that time, then the group can decide how they want to manage their surplus. If you go to the next slide.
And then a key difference in level funding is that you don't get the 100% of the surplus back. With your typical level funded plan, you typically get 50% and maybe 75% if it's a particular carrier, but that's a huge advantage in regards to level funding as well.
And I would also add that under carrier level funded plans, the carrier is setting the renewal rates. So they're setting the rates to their advantage from that standpoint. And I give you an example. I won't name the carrier, but basically I had a group come to us. They were about a 82 person group. And they had just hired a new employee, and she had a child treating for cystic fibrosis, and they had just gone on a specialty med, which is $354,000 a year. And the carrier gave them a 261% increase on their stop loss premium based on the fact that they had this ongoing risk now that they were going to have to cover. That would not have happened under the Veris model because we would be protecting each member from that kind of claim volatility. So, I think that we really address a lot of those aspects. The one note on compliance, we will, when a group joins any of our programs, and we will actually do a Department of Labor compliance audit to make sure that all their documents are in place, all their I's are dotted, T's are crossed. They actually get an electronic file that has all of their policies and procedures. So if they were ever to be approached by the Department of Labor, they have all of that at their fingertips. There is no cost to the group for us to do that. We want to make sure that we don't have any surprises down the road. That's why we do it. And our finance team does all the money management. Groups over 100, they have a choice where they could go pay at max, or what we call pay as you go. So that pay as you go would be a more traditional funding arrangement where, in essence, we just bill the admin and the stop loss premiums, and then the carrier bills the group weekly for any claims that they incur. A note on that, just for full disclosure, if a group is over 100 enrolled and they do set up a trust account or even a separate account internally within their company, they have to have that account audited by an independent auditing firm when we file the Schedule H under the 5500 filings. We do all the filings on behalf of the groups, but that's just a note that there is a audit expense associated with opening up a trust account for a group that has 100 plus enrolled.
And those in that world are somewhat used to it in regards to their retirement plans and other ERISA level things they might have going on. So it might not be an unfamiliar thing for some of those groups.
Correct. So anybody that has a 401k has to have that audited from that standpoint. If you want to go back to the Wendy, the slide before, just real quick. So we're pretty well set up with a lot of the administrators where we have a fair amount of volume where we're getting the raw data. So we have what's called Benicon Analytics. It really kind of drills down into the claim utilization for a group. And then Connect Care 3, which is our sister company, that they basically work with all of that data, and they work with our broker partners as far as getting more detailed solutions for the members, because the bottom line is a dollar saved is a dollar of surplus. So we spend an awful lot of energy focusing in on that aspect to really see what is driving costs, what kind of education, how can we assist members in accessing the whole healthcare system, which is very complex. And that way, I think the idea or the goal is to have healthy, happier, covered members under your health plan. I think we're good on that slide. So I'm just real quickly, we're going to just touch on this slide. Just shows really the growth. So we started our largest program, Veris, in 2012. I think at that point we had 15 groups, and it has basically grown exponentially over the years. If you go to the next slide, we're gonna kind of just look real quickly at two things. We're going to look at the historical claim fund performance, and then we'll look at the stop loss performance. If you go to the next slide, so we're going to look at the claim fund first. So if you go to the next slide, this shows you really, in essence, the historical performance. And this is kind of interesting because this represents 60 to 70% of your funding, depending on the size group. And this is looking at globally, everybody in Veris, what did we expect their claims to be compared to actually what was paid? And as you'll see, other than 2013, where we hit 107%, and then in 2021 as a result of COVID, but you can see that historically we're within a couple percentage points, if not spot on. And the reason, there's really three reasons for this. One, we use the last 18 months of a group's historical claim utilization for claims under the specific deductible. Secondly, we use trends that are inherent to the almost 3 billion of premium that we manage. And we keep everybody in a predictable claim layer based on their size. So I only want members, when we set the spec deductible, I want them basically only exposed to what we feel is a very predictable claim layer, and transfer all the volatile risk off into the global stop loss. So if you go to the next slide, and just a final note, we're kind of out of that impact of COVID. Going into 2024, I think we're really looking back to where we were prior to that. So if you go to the next slide, this will show really, in essence, the historical performance of the global stop loss. And I'm kind of sort of proud of our actuarial team, because they've done a really good job of, as we've grown, of trying to predict what do we think those claims will be for the upcoming year, and what kind of adjustments do we need to make on a global basis to that overall stop loss volume. You can see early on that, in essence, the stop loss partner was kind of lost money on the initial Verus model. Again, we sort of managed that to that target over time. And you'll see that in the next slide as far as the percentages. But take a note on like 20, if you go back to the stop loss one, if you look at 2012, 2017, 18, 19, before we had the event of COVID, we were pretty much spot on what we thought the claims are going to be above the spec level compared to actually what was paid. So the true blue is what did we expect the claims to be. The light blue is the margin, as I had alluded, as far as that target loss ratio. And then the dark blue is the actual paid claims. You can see the impact in 2021 of COVID. And a lot of this resulted in the fact of delayed care. So those people that contracted cancer that may have been a stage 1, 2 in 2020 may have transformed into a stage 3, 4 from that standpoint. So that's really what drove that. Now that has sort of settled down, and we're getting a little bit more better predictability moving forward. And then the last slide is the renewal history.
I'm sorry, Dave, interrupting. Why do the people on this call care about that? How does that impact, and why is that, everything you've just said, better for them than where they might be? What's the advantage?
I think it's stabilizing the overall cost of the group purchasing over time. If you're standing out on your own, you're going to be rated based on your own individual experience. I think it's important to know that, hey, we're managing this global stop loss premium volume, and keep driving it to that target loss ratio, so they know as a member that they're getting kind of the best value for the insurance they're buying to cover risk they don't want to be exposed to.
So what we've seen over the years, because we've been doing this with you for several years now, and we have a lot of clients doing this, is exactly that, the stabilization of the overall costs of their, and the ability, because of the data and the analytics, to be able to see under the hood areas where you can start trying to address and bend the curve of identifiable areas, but then that overall management to keep costs more at a levelized pace, as opposed to the 7 to 9 to 12 to 15% annual trend increases, and some employers that have had 15, 20, or 30% increases year to year. So all of this work that you guys are doing helps bend the curve and stabilizes everything for the employer, right?
Yes, and we're, I think each employer can customize, any kind of programs they want to bring into play to try to bend that curve. And it's reflective of, I mean, this is showing the average renewal adjustment. It's not taking in consideration any surplus the groups may have. And you can see the lowest renewal has typically been a negative adjustment, and that's because they're running way below expected. And so they've really addressed what's driving those underlying costs that are covering those costs under that spec deductible. And that's really where it becomes, I think, an important role for both of our organizations. And there's a lot of plug and play that you can do. We just added Revere Health, which is it's more of a robust telemarketing, teledoc or from that standpoint, which has had impacts on reducing overall claim costs for members.
Well, this was very informative, at times probably deep, for those that may not have had a lot of exposure to this kind of thing. Our job as the advisor in helping our clients and prospective clients is to determine the viability and suitability of these kinds of programs, right? So we as the advisor have a process to help you figure out if this is the best thing for you or if it's even something to consider. So having an active, experienced advisor involved to manage that, is this the right thing for us or not process, is really critical. So we're happy to work with Dave and anyone on the call to determine that with you. And you can reach out to us and let us know if there's you can reach out to any of our teammates. James and Wendy are on the call today, along with Allison and some of our other teammates. But before we finish this up, any final thoughts, Dave or Wendy or James or anybody else? Any questions from those attending?
Well, the only final comment I'll make is simply that I think a 98% retention over 30 some years is reflective of it works. As one of our actuarial team, he said, our programs are stellar when you have a bad year, and they're great when you have a good year. So it's really enabling members to get into a self-funded platform in a very protected environment. And that's really what we've been doing all our careers is creating those opportunities and aggregating multiple employers to enable them to really have the best funding mechanism for funding their benefits. And I think that's has always been sort of our goal and mission from that standpoint.
Thank you, Dave. A lot of
Thank you.
information. We have a lot of groups that are with Veris Benecon and that have been with Veris Benecon for quite some time. None of our groups have left Veris. If you want to have that conversation to see if this is a fit for you, we are so happy to do that. We are grateful that Dave joined us today. And if anyone has any questions going forward, please feel free to reach out to Lewis, to James, to me, to Allison, to anyone over here at Weiner Benefits Group. And you will be able to find the recording on our website in about 2 days. Lewis?
Well, that concludes the fourth in our series. I think the next is educational webinar we may have in a couple of weeks will be on the Delaware family leave program that's running at us like a freight train. So look for additional communication on that and some other ideas. But thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to speaking with you. Thanks again, Dave. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate
Thank you,
the opportunity.
everyone.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.